Welcome back to the Make or Break shop. This week we're going to be working on some shop furniture that includes a miter station with dust collection and key track for measurement, as well as some shelves to put some Harbor Freight containers for small parts. All right, let's get into it. So the very first step of this process is we need to clean out all of this junk around this miter station so I can make a big place that this is gonna be going into. But the miter station basically is gonna be from here all the way, that window. And then that laser is actually gonna go a little bit closer to the wall. So let's get to cleaning so we can actually get to building. So this thing's gonna be going down the entire length of this wall, and then I'm gonna leave a small section on this far end right here for the laser cutter. It's basically just gonna be 2x4 boxes with plywood on top. So we are going to knock out the frame right now to make sure all the spacing works right and I don't need to cut things down to size so everything fits. To make the frame, we are using 2x4s and I am cutting them to size. And then to connect them all together, I'm using a Craig jig. I could be using some wood glue as well, but there's a chance I might have to take all this down, so I'm just gonna use screws for right now. All right, so we've got this thing pretty much assembled with the top, and what I'm finding is I really don't like all of these holes that I've drilled in. I don't really know why I did so many. So what I'm gonna do is actually take this top off and flip it over, as well as I forgot to put the top on where the drill press is going to be, where it's gonna sit underneath. So now we're gonna work on the drill press section of this build. The big thing I wanted to do is actually get this base off of this. But if I had wood going across this, I didn't want it to hit the base. So I'm just getting the base underneath, and all I'm really doing is just cutting out a section on the 3/4 inch plywood, and then I have another base that this thing can sit down on. I'm gonna wind up raising this up just a little bit so that this thing can drop down the entire way. But overall, this is just a really easy, pretty simple solution to having a drill press on this, as well as keeping the space open for when I wanna put long pieces of wood all the way down the miter station. So right now we're gonna be working on the hood, and I actually already have this installed, and what I'm finding is that I actually need to make this go further back because I don't have a ton of room. There's really only 7 inches from the end of this to this, and I wanna be able to push this back a little bit further. So I'm gonna take about 4 inches off of this hood just so I have a little bit more space up front, so then I can get at least something that's 10 inches wide flat on this surface. So for the dust collection, I've got one of these 4-inch connector things that I'm just gonna put in this back corner. I'm gonna leave the little dust hose connector on the miter saw and kind of shoot it off to this right back corner. We'll see how well this does, but I can also put another one on the other side and then run the dust collection down below with some more tubes. So we're gonna install this real quick by cutting out a hole, and then I'm just gonna screw it down. So we added the kind of the dust hood to the front. I'm just using some scrap pieces that I've got left over to kind of see how this is working. Overall, it's working fairly well. This isn't obviously the best at keeping dust down anyway, but there's a lot less that's coming to the front, which I would make a huge mess before. So there were a couple gaps as I was kind of putting this together, so I'm just gonna seal those just with some 1/4-inch plywood so that you can't see it, and then we will be good to go. All right, so this is starting to look a little bit different, kind of like my face. And we're attaching this permanently, or permanent-ish, to the miter station. I'm just using some 1/4-inch bolts. And then I'm gonna use actually washers to dial in the actual distance. You can tell right now that we're just a little bit off. To fix that, I've got several washers that I'm gonna be dropping underneath right here just to lift the whole thing up. All right, so I'm gonna get one side, make sure I get the spacing right, and then I can do the same to everything else and knock this out. So one of the great parts about having a miter station is you can add measurements and ways to clamp down material specific to the way you work. And with this guy, I wanted to add T-track so that I could add a stop lock. And this is if I'm doing repeatable cuts. It makes it way easier to get the exact same one each time. You can dial stuff in really quick. This is just 3/4 of an inch that I routed out and then screwed this down. And then I also have seen people add a little bit of measuring tape. So links to this T-track as well as measuring tape is down below. This stuff is really cheap, really easy to add. So one thing I did is I actually added tape directly to the miter saw. It wasn't that big of a deal for me to add it to it because this isn't a super nice one. And then these are just little bolts with some rubber nuts on top. And they slide right in. And then you can clamp it down. And you can do it right off of the tape measure. Some people also will put a little rod that will stick out. You can actually use that as a stop lock as well to get this thing set up. All right, so as we've been building this thing, I've been going off of a Fusion 360 model that I did beforehand. I actually put this entire thing together in SketchUp first to kind of get an idea of the layout of my workshop, and then I went back and actually added in the details inside of Fusion. One of the big things about Fusion that's super helpful is you can actually change parameters on the fly, so even things like the number of drawers that I'm working with, all that kind of stuff I'm able to edit inside of Fusion. And I wanted to say that as a quick shout out because this video is brought to you guys by the awesome supporters over on Patreon. And one of the levels for Patreon that you guys get are these actual Fusion 360 models. So there's a bunch of different things you guys can do to support the channel, but that is a big one. And thank you if you already support, and if you're interested in getting this model, as well as a bunch of other ones that I've done in the past, you can check it out at the link down below. All right, so we are working on this shelf, and I'm just using Craig Jig again to do all of the holes and the pocket holes for this. And then I'm gonna make sure this thing is square. So this is just gonna be a wall so I can have something to mount the little sliders, because we're basically making a shelf for this guy. So we are getting all of these installed using a little spacer and just gluing and brad nailing it in. So I know this isn't the nicest of all miter stations. A lot of people actually make this out of 3/4 inch plywood, but in my case, I wanted something pretty quick and pretty cheap that's gonna get the job done. So 2x4s are working really well for me. In the future, I'm gonna be going in and adding in some drawers. I'm gonna try to do them without metal drawer slides. They're just gonna be on little pieces of wood. So if that is done, you can check that out right there. If not, there's a bunch of other videos of things we've been doing inside of the shop, including what this R2-D2 head goes on top of. So I'd actually love to know what you guys are doing inside of your shops. Leave me a comment below with how you have things like this set up or what you are thinking about. So until next time, go make or break something in your shop. See you guys.